Welcome to Fun Facts Daily, your source for just the good stuff. Monday through Friday, we're bringing fun facts and news you can use, all carefully curated to uplift and inform. So give yourself a break, relax, and learn something awesome in just a few minutes every day. Hi everyone, I'm Kyle Wood, and today we're going to be learning about the North Pole. But before we get into the facts, let's warm up our brains with a little challenge to see if you can tell fact from fiction. Consider this. In holiday movies, comic books, and greeting cards, the North Pole is marked by a festive red and white candy cane striped pole sticking out of the snow. It shows you exactly where the top of the world is, but is this an accurate picture? If you trekked out to the geographic North Pole, would you actually find a literal North Pole with red and white stripes sticking out of the ground? What do you think? We'll find out at the end of the episode. Now for your word of the day. Our word for today is Arctic. That's ARCTIC. The Arctic is the polar region located at the northernmost part of the Earth, which includes the Arctic Ocean, adjacent seas, and parts of Alaska, Canada, Finland, Greenland, Iceland, Norway, Russia, and Sweden. While we often use the word simply to describe freezing cold weather, geographically it refers to the area north of the Arctic Circle, where the sun doesn't set on the summer solstice and doesn't rise on the winter solstice. Scientists define this area not just by lines on a map, but often the tree line, which is the northern limit where trees can grow, or by temperature, specifically areas where the average temperature for the warmest month is below 50 degrees Fahrenheit. The word Arctic comes from the Greek word artkos, which translates to bear. But this isn't because the polar bears roam on the ice up there. It's actually a reference to the stars in the night sky. The Greeks named the region after the constellation Ursa Major, or the Great Bear, which is always visible in the northern sky and rotates around the North Star. Time for your daily high five, our top 5 fun facts about the North Pole. Number 1. At the North Pole, you would experience only one sunrise and one sunset every single year. Due to the unique tilt of the Earth's axis as it orbits the sun, the North Pole experiences daylight and darkness much differently than we do in the rest of the world. The sun rises on the vernal equinox, usually around March 20th, and it stays in the sky for a full 6 months, circling the horizon without ever setting. The phenomenon is known as the midnight sun, meaning it can be 3 a.m. and still look like the middle of the afternoon. Once the autumnal equinox hits around September 23rd, the sun finally sets, plunging the North Pole into 6 months of polar night. This doesn't mean it goes pitch black instantly. There are several weeks of twilight where the sky is dark blue before total darkness sets in for the deep winter. This unique cycle means that a day at the North Pole lasts for an entire year. Number 2. There are actually 2 different North Poles. One of them is constantly moving. We usually think of the North Pole as a fixed point on the top of the globe, which is called the geographic North Pole, where all the lines of longitude meet. But there's also the magnetic North Pole, which is the spot your compass needle points to. This magnetic point is created by the currents of molten iron moving deep inside the Earth's core, creating a magnetic field. Because the molten iron in the core is always churning and changing, the magnetic North Pole actually wanders and shifts its position over time. Since its discovery in 1831, it has been slowly moving from the Canadian Arctic towards Siberia. In recent years, this movement has actually sped up, requiring scientists to update navigation systems more frequently to ensure planes and ships stay on course. Number 3, the North Pole technically has no specific time zone. In most places on Earth, the time zone is determined by your longitude, meaning the time zones change as you move east or west. But because the North Pole is the point where all the lines of longitude converge or meet, technically it exists in all time zones simultaneously. This creates a strange sort of situation for anyone visiting. I mean, if you're in all time zones at once, then what time is it? Because there's no permanent human habitation at the geographic North Pole, there's never been a need to assign a strict official time zone to that specific spot on the map. Visitors and scientific expeditions usually just use the time zone of their country of origin or the time zone of the nearest inhabited land. This makes the North Pole one of the few places on Earth where you can essentially choose what time you want it to be. Number 4. While it does experience freezing temperatures, the North Pole is significantly warmer than the South Pole. Let's be clear, both poles are incredibly cold, but the South Pole in Antarctica is far colder, with average winter temperatures reaching negative 76 degrees Fahrenheit. The North Pole, by comparison, averages around negative 40 degrees Fahrenheit in the winter, which is still freezing, but much more manageable. The reason for this temperature discrepancy comes down to, well, what's down there beneath the ice. The South Pole sits on top of a massive, high-altitude continent covered in a thick ice sheet, while the North Pole sits at sea level over the Arctic Ocean. The water of the ocean beneath the North Pole's ice acts as a heat reservoir, trapping some warmth and moderating the temperature on the ice above it. Because the South Pole is high up in the mountains and far away from the warming influence of the ocean, it retains much less heat. And our 5th and final fun fact for today: even though it's one of the most remote places on Earth, people actually run a marathon at the North Pole. It's hard to imagine, but the North Pole Marathon is a real event recognized by the Guinness World Records as the northernmost marathon on Earth. Runners from around the world fly to a temporary camp on the ice and run the standard 26.2 miles in sub-zero temperatures. Instead of running on asphalt, they have to trudge through snow and run over frozen ice floes. This race presents challenges that no other marathons can offer. I mean, the ground actually is drifting beneath the runner's feet. Because the ice is floating on the ocean, the finish line can actually move several miles from where it started by the time the race is over. And while most runners will usually prefer cooler conditions because it is an intense workout going for all those miles, this is a little cooler than most people would be comfortable with. They have to wear layers of thermal clothing and even face masks to protect against frostbite, all while also navigating uneven and slippery terrain. Now for some news you can use. Since we're talking about ice and snow, I think the best tip I can give you for winter months is to learn how to walk like a penguin. Now, I know the topic for today is the North Pole and penguins live at the South Pole, but even though you won't find them in the Arctic, their famous waddling gait is still the perfect technique for maintaining your balance in any icy environment. When humans normally walk, we split our weight mid-stride, which is dangerous on ice because it forces your legs apart, leading to slips and falls. When you're walking like a penguin, you want to point your feet slightly outward, taking short, shuffling steps, and keep your hands out of your pockets to help with balance. If you do happen to lose your balance, try to tuck your chin to your chest and land on a part of your body that has a bit more cushioning, like your hip or your thigh, rather than reaching out with your hands because you don't want to injure your wrists or even break a bone. When it's time to get up, don't just jump to your feet. Roll onto your hands and knees first to get stable before standing up slowly to make sure you don't slip and fall right back down. Finally, the moment you've been waiting for. At the beginning of the episode, I asked if there really is a permanent marker, a literal pole at the North Pole. Well, this one's a fallacy. Since the North Pole is located on a shifting ice sheet that's constantly moving and drifting over the ocean, it would be impossible to leave a permanent marker up there. Any flag or pole you planted would drift miles away within a few days. Occasional expeditions will bring a temporary sign for a photo op, but they have to take it with them when they leave to keep the Arctic clean. Now, some of you might be thinking you have definitely seen a red and white striped pole in the snow, and that is true, but it's not at the North Pole. Those photographs are of the ceremonial South Pole in Antarctica. At the South Pole, which is on solid land, there's a very real pole painted with red and white stripes, topped with a mirrored chromium ball, and surrounded by the flags of the Antarctic Treaty Nations. Because tourists and scientists take photos next to this red and white pole, many people conflate these images and think it must be up at the North Pole. And of course, images created for movies, cartoons, and illustrations have only reinforced this popular misconception. Now, I hope you enjoyed learning a bit about the North Pole with me today. Be sure to tune in every weekday for even more fun facts. Fun Facts Daily is an Airwave Media podcast. It was written, recorded, mixed, and edited by me, Kyle Wood. Thanks for sharing a part of your day with me. Be sure to follow Fun Facts Daily on your favorite podcast app so you can keep the good stuff coming your way every day. And if you like the show, please do me a favor and leave a kind rating, review, or just tell your friends about it.